we're all going to die at some point, So I'm really curious as to why we find it so hard to talk about death when it is inevitable for all of us.
Trying to create this illusion that we're in control.
Mm.
And maybe death is the ultimate reminder that we aren't.
Welcome to Midlife Unfiltered, a podcast about unapologetically embracing the season of me as we live the lives we want in midlife and beyond. I'm Anita McLachlan.
I'm Erica Webb. We're here to make some noise, say hell no to outdated stereotypes, and hell yes to living life on our terms.
Why don't we talk openly about death? It will happen to each and every one of us, yet we typically don't go there, perhaps until we know it's near, if at all. Do you talk about death? If so, in what context? It's a bit like menopause, I think. All women go through it, but it's not widely spoken of, though that is changing. Maybe we can change the conversation around death. Erica, hello.
Hey Anita, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I mean, this is a big topic and I have a lot of thoughts swimming around in my head and I'm looking forward to exploring it and a little, trepidatious as well.
Yeah, I 100% appreciate that. I don't know. I think a good place to start is, death is often unspoken about, particularly in our Western culture. We're here based in Australia. Was death ever something you spoke about in your family?
I've been thinking about this a lot. And when I was 1 year old, my grandmother died in our home. And my mum was her carer. And I this is just sort of like popping into my head as we're doing this. So I haven't given you the heads up about this. But my mum was her carer. And in the end stages of her life, she lived in our home. And I recall being told that my first steps were towards my grandmother on her deathbed. And I think that without realizing it, death really set a significant foundation for my life. Those early experiences with death, because they really impacted my mum and consequently impacted, I think, the way that I was parented. And so I don't remember us talking a lot about death, but I remember it being a presence because we lost mum's mum when I was 1. My grandfather, so her father, died when I was also very young. We moved to Australia from Canada when I was 6 years old, and I still had my dad's parents, but they died sometime in the short years following that. And so I never really had to face the death because I was never there. I was never present to those deaths. I was, half a world away or a child, too small to even really recognize what was going on. But I do think it was a very significant presence somehow in our life. Growing up, I faced a couple of early losses of one of my husband's friends died really young, like in university, and then a friend of ours died in his late 20s. And so it's been sort of a thing that's been there, but I don't know that I've ever really noticed that or acknowledged that. One of my early memories, I think, more around death was actually a fear of hell more than anything. I had all these experiences of I guess, death in my periphery and in my immediate vicinity. But I think from a conversation point of view, the only thing I really ever heard spoken about was this kind of fear, I guess, of death and dying in a state of having been judged to have lived incorrectly. So I was raised in a very religious home, which I've since moved away from. But I do think that in my mind, rather than my experiences of death being linked to those early losses, it for a long time was very linked to fear of damnation, almost, you know? So I don't know. I think I have a very complicated, I mean, don't we all? I don't think I'm alone in that, but I think I have a very complicated relationship with death. I'm not afraid to talk about it, but I feel ill-equipped. Does that make sense?
You took the words pretty much out of my mouth. That's what I was thinking at the time that you said it.
Mm,
I have not had much experience with death closely, only once, but death's not something that was spoken of in my family a lot either, and it still really isn't. It's more the only conversations we've had around death is after you die, do you want to be buried or do you want to be cremated? Those kinds of, I guess, practical questions around death,
mm,
but not much more than that. So I'm really curious about exploring this topic because I do think, like, we're all going to die at some point, So I'm really curious as to why we find it so hard to talk about death when it is inevitable for all of us. It is the one
mm,
thing that, we're all born and we all die, and that's in a strange, not a strange way, but that's what binds us all together, right? And we have the same destiny. How it happens is different, but the end, we all are going to die. So I'm really
mm,
curious to understand and appreciate why it is that we don't go there with conversation. Whereas in other cultures, it is explored, and, the Day of the Dead and all of that, So in other cultures it is, but in our culture it's not, and I don't know why that is. Maybe do you think it's
mm.
is it a religion thing that could be throwing that fear into play, or I'm just grappling here? What do you think?
Oh, do you know, my brain's going off in a slightly different direction to the question that you're asking, but I wonder if it's going to kind of almost like pull back around. I
Mhm.
remember in a very naive, childlike way being put off by the aftermath of death in the sense of that exact thing that you just said. We know that that is the end for everyone. So why does it come as such a shock almost, like that very, and I even saying that, I'm like, I don't know how to articulate the very sort of childlike flavor that that thought has to it. Because it's not like I'm not kind of currently thinking like that in this moment, but I do remember thinking, wow, like, the loss of a person should feel like an inevitability because we know it is the outcome for every single one of us. So I wonder if part of the reason that it is so taboo is because on the one hand, you have that inevitability. We know that every single one of us is going to die at some point. And then on the other hand, you have the fact that that comes along with a level of emotional discomfort and grief and anger and sadness and fear and all of those other things that we simply don't want to experience or hold because it sucks and it hurts and it's unpleasant. So is it that we're afraid to talk about death because by doing so we have to face those other things that feel so deeply
Mm,
uncomfortable? But then on
mm,
the other hand, if we talked about it more, would we get more comfortable with the uncomfortable nature of it? I don't know. I think for me, there's an element of the unknown to that. Like so often we hear flippant comments about death. Oh, well, you don't know how long you've got. Embrace today. We talk around the edges of this notion that
mm,
we're all going to
mm,
die. We use it to motivate ourselves in a lot of ways and to embrace the moment. Is it the fact that it's so unpredictable? Is it the fact
mm,
that, there's this sense that it could come for you at any moment? And what have we left undone? What have we left unsaid? I don't
mm.
know. I feel like it's so multifaceted, but there's no
Multi-layered, yeah.
doubt that it's uncomfortable, really uncomfortable.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I think they're really good points about it. I guess from an academic standpoint, it's I would think that, like most things, if we open up about it, in theory, it should be easier to um, sit with those emotions when they come
Mm.
in potentially. I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's why we're going to be calling upon an end of life doula in our next episode, talking about death, because Jackie will have a whole lot more to say, and maybe she can enlighten us around the emotion of death and other aspects of it. I think her work is
Mm.
incredible and very much needed. Um, yeah, I don't know. I it'll be something to think about before um, that episode and post episode as well. I think there's much for me personally to think about. Yeah, because my only experience firsthand, like you, growing up, my grandparents have all passed, but I was never there when it happened, or I wasn't involved in that experience. Um, I was with one of my best friends who died of breast cancer, and we, her close friends and her husband, we were there in her final hours. Um, That's been the closest experience I've had of death. Um, and I think I don't know that I've really even processed it even from that experience. You know, there's still parts of me that
Mm.
won't even go there. You know, denial, I think, in some ways is still very much there. Um, I feel blessed that I was there at the time, as difficult as it was. We were doing it together with the sole focus of making it as comfortable as we possibly could for her, and to give her whatever we felt she needed, or because she was lucid at times, and at times not, just to be and to sit with her in those final days and hours. Um, so I think that's part of the death experience from my point of view. Is I think it's having that, it draws on compassion, you know, and just being happy to sit and be in it, um, whatever comes up, whatever comes up. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that helps or hinders.
And well, I mean, I think it all helps, right? Any conversation that we're willing to have about this helps. It occurs to me too that when we think about death, there is also the reality that we're facing both our own mortality and the mortality of people that we love. And, your best friend being lost to breast cancer far too young also brings up that sense that sometimes death is incredibly cruel.
Mm,
Whilst it might be an inevitable outcome for everybody everywhere across all, every generation forever and ever, there is also the reality that sometimes that comes far too soon and far too cruelly for our liking. There's something very different between speaking of the death of a 99-year-old than a
mm,
49-year-old.
mm,
Um, and perhaps it's our fear of an untimely death or an uncomfortable, cruel death that is the hardest part, because we all have had an experience of, if not, an immediate experience of that with a loved one, we certainly have heard the stories. We know that that is a possibility. So perhaps there is an element of like that, we all move through life with this, trying to create this illusion that we're in control.
mm, mm.
And maybe death is the ultimate reminder that we aren't.
Oh, that is so good. Yes, that is it. I think that's a key component of it, that we are not in
Mm,
control. And you're right, we spend most of our lives trying to maintain control and be in control, but that is something we can't. And then that brings in the fear and all the rest
And
of it.
fear
Yeah, I
for,
think that's right.
yeah, everyone, right? Like fear for all the people that mean something to us, not just ourselves. Because I think that's the thing is it's like it's this multi-tiered fear. I can't control the safety of everyone I love either,
Mm,
no matter how hard I try.
yeah. It's got me thinking about this concept of an ethical will. Have you heard about that?
Mm. I have only come across that recently.
Yeah. I think it's also called a legacy letter. So it's
Mm.
about it's not a will where, last will and testament, these are my goods and chattels and this is who it's going to, blah, blah, blah. No, this is about you as the person. Writing this ahead of your death as this is my legacy for those I'm saying goodbye to, but this is my story for you. This is who I
Mm.
am for you, what I value, what I know. It's kind of like a love letter.
Hmm.
We've talked about those letters from love, right? I've just thought of that. I think it's kind of like a love letter. Um, yeah, and maybe that's when maybe some of this needs, is going to be negative as well. I don't know. Maybe it won't all be positive. I like to think of it that way, maybe. But I thought if that was part of our life when we, are thinking of death. I think this came from the Jewish faith originally. I could be wrong, but I think that's what I read, was that it's the afterlife is not something that happens to us after we're judged and we either go to heaven or hell or how some religions frame it, but it's more about the legacy that you leave,
Hmm.
is the heaven on earth, if you like. Um, so yeah, I think if I'm going to explore this, and it'll be great to talk to Jackie about this because I'm sure this is something that she has in her day to day life and the work that she does. Um, how helpful, useful is it? A good tool? Is it something that would help to usher in the conversations and to feel those emotions or be familiar with them?
Mm.
Pardon me. I need to take a sip of water. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, I love the link of that to this notion of the of letters from love. It also makes me think, is that part of the fear that the legacy we've left behind isn't the one we would have chosen? Could we have written that story differently? I do wonder about that sometimes in terms of there's so much I still want to do. There's so many things I still want to experience and leave behind. So I wonder if that's part of the fear too, and if writing an ethical will leads you to perhaps have more curiosity about and understanding of what matters to you and how you want to live,
Mm.
you know? Mm.
Mm. Mm. I think so. I think that would be a very worthwhile and beautiful thing to do, and
Mm.
a great legacy to leave behind. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh,
Was there
well,
anything else
I
we
don't know
wanted to
about
cover,
you.
Anita? I feel like we are
I
sort of
I
trying
I
to
don't.
lead into our conversation with Jackie.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered it all off, Erica, with the notes that I had.
Mm.
Um, let's just hope that I would really like this to be a conversation that we revisit time and time again
Yes.
because I do think it needs to be aired. I think it can only sure, it might be uncomfortable, but I do believe in my heart that, it would lead to more good ultimately, if that's even the right word. I don't know if that's even the right word. whether it's comfort, I don't know. Yeah.
More humaning together is what comes to my mind.
Yeah.
Mm,
Humanity of it all. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Because it does something for all of us. It's all coming our way. So, yeah.
absolutely.
Well, let's see what Jackie has to say, right, in our next episode when we
I'm looking
welcome
forward to it.
Jackie into our world for a conversation about death as an end-of-life doula. Thanks very much. Thanks, Erica. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you then.
See you, Anita.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for Midlife Unfiltered. If you loved this episode, you're going to love what's coming next. Be sure you're subscribed on your platform of choice so you don't miss a thing.
We'd also be delighted, and for sure do a little happy dance, if you took the time to leave us a rating and review. Those not only absolutely make our day, but more importantly, it helps other women who may be wanting something more from their midlife to know about us and to listen in as well. You can connect with us on socials too. You'll find links to connect on LinkedIn, Instagram, and email in the show notes.